A little earlier, we were talking about the woman that had the vessels, and the prophet says, "What do you have in your house?" And she said, "I don't have anything." And she thought, "But a jar of oil. All I've got is a jar of oil." Here's the instruction from the prophet. Then he said, "Go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors." From how many neighbors? All your neighbors. Empty vessels, do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons, then pour into all those vessels. Now get this, when he's telling her this, it did not make sense. He's saying, look, she says, "I got a jar of oil." He says, "Great. Go and borrow vessels from everybody, empty ones, as many people as you can. And when you get here, close the door and start pouring into all the vessels." Now, it did not take a brain surgeon to know that this does not make sense. This does not make sense. Why would you want me to go and borrow vessels from everybody and pour into all of them when I'm telling you that all I've got is a jar of oil? That's where we fall short right there. Some of us would not have completed the mission because it did not make sense. Oftentimes, God will put you on a journey that will not make sense. He's telling you to do something, and you're so smart that you're outsmarting God. Well, God, let me tell you, that's not how it works. You're going to tell God how it works. You see, God, all I got is a little oil and all those vessels. It does not make sense, so I'm not going. How much have we forfeited because it did not make sense? We were limiting ourselves from the blessing because we did not step out on faith. And he says to her, "Set the full ones aside." So she went from him, shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, wait a minute, when the vessels were full, which means she started pouring, and the oil kept multiplying and filling vessel after vessel after vessel. Now it's time to rejoice. No. The time to rejoice was when you got the instruction. You see, you've got to rejoice when God gives you the instruction. God, I don't understand what you're telling me, but I'm rejoicing, God, that you've given me direction. I'm going to do exactly what you say. Anyone can rejoice after the victory. True believers rejoice before the victory, because we know we already have the victory. It's called dancing in advance, right? When you know God, you can dance in advance, knowing that what I've prayed for, I've already received it. So when I get up off my knees, I start dancing, right? Why? Because I know that God has already delivered that promise. So she starts pouring, and oil is filling up vessel after vessel, and they're singing and dancing and shouting. That's what my mother would be doing. Then she says, "Bring me another vessel." And they bring in vessels. And finally she said, "Bring me another one." And then her son says, "There is not another vessel." "Mom, that's it. All the vessels are full." She said, "Well, bring me more." "That's it. That's all." And then the Bible says, so the oil, what? Ceased. If there were still vessels, there would still be oil. She would still be pouring today if she still had vessels. The limit was on what we can bring God. How much can I give God? Because God's going to use what we avail to him, and the more I can give to God, the more God will fulfill in my life. It's not God that's limited. We limit God because we bring just what we believe, and God said, if you brought me more, I could return more back to you. The proof of this is the tithe. God says, bring me all the tithe. All, how much? All the tithe into the storehouse. I mean, let me make this simple. Let's say if you made $500, and the tithe will be 50, right? 10%, is that right? But you're used to giving 5. And I've given 5 way back since 1952. But in 1952, 5 was worth a lot more than it is today. So now what I'm not really giving 10%, which is 50. I'm giving $5, which is how much? 1%. Is that right? You get the math? I should be giving 50. I'm giving 5 consistently. So rather than 10%, I'm giving 1%. 1%. Now what? Now I'm not being blessed on 10%. I'm being blessed on what? 1%. So now when I'm praying to God and I'm expecting God to bring me the harvest, God's bringing me a 1% return. You're getting as much as your harvest allows. As much as you've given God, God's giving back to you, pressed down your 1%. And you say, but God, I thought you said, but God says, but I gave you a command. And if you just given what you should give, you would now have it pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. But we're struggling because we don't really understand the principle of God. The oil did not stop until the vessel stopped. Once the vessel stopped, ceased the oil. As long as you're bringing God vessels, as long as you're availing yourself to God, God will keep filling you.